Lygon Street, Carlton, Double Bay in Sydney. No, it's a country town in central Victoria, about an hour and a half's drive out of Melbourne. The town's Daylesford, and for most country towns in Australia, it's a tourism dream come true. On most weekends, the number of people in the town can swell from just over 3,000 to nearly 6,000. In this program, we're going to look at some of the reasons why Daylesford has become such a significant tourist destination and just what the impact of all this tourism activity has been on the town's economy, the community who lives there and the local environment.
Well, I think probably a lot of the credit should go to the Lake House restaurant, which started up about 10 or 12 years ago, perhaps a little more, and then followed by the Convent Gallery. Now they opened just about the same time as we came here, but that attracted a lot of publicity, and people started to rediscover the beauty of the area and what used to make it a prime tourist destination back in the 20s and 30s.
Tourism isn't new to Daylesford. The Aboriginal population knew about the mineral springs at Hepburn, and in the late 1800s, the same springs and wooded countryside attracted people from Melbourne who stayed in one of the many fashionable guest houses of the time. The discovery of gold in the 1850s saw the arrival of Swiss and Italian miners who settled in the area and had quite an influence on the local architecture and the feel of the town. The area was promoted as a place to go by the Victorian Railways after the rail line was put through from Ballarat in 1881. But after the Second World War and the greater mobility people had with the boom in private motorcar travel, Daylesford lost its appeal to the travellers and, like many towns in rural Australia, started to lose population and fall into decline. By the 1970s, empty shops and decaying buildings told their own story.
When I moved up here, there was one milk bar, maybe two milk bars. Most of the shop windows had newspaper or painted out windows or plumbing fittings sitting in the and they were obviously being used for store by the local builders. I had a son who took the handbrake off the car while we were buying fish and chips, and it ran down the entire main street without hitting anything because there were absolutely no cars there.
At the time, the town and surrounds became home to a variety of new settlers, attracted by the cheap real estate prices and the natural beauty of the location. It also attracted chef Alla Wolf-Tasker, who was looking for somewhere to establish an upmarket country restaurant. Daylesford was where she had holidayed as a young child.
We knew when we opened Lake House that we would have to make it a destination in its own right, because there wasn't much traffic into Daylesford at all in terms of tourism, and there was really no other tourist product. Anything that had been tourist product had fallen into disrepair a long time ago.
In spite of advice from the local council that the restaurant was a silly idea, the business grew in popularity, and the people seeking Alla's fine dining at Lake House did learn where Daylesford was once again, and they started to explore the town, rediscover the spa waters, and look for accommodation. The timing was right as it coincided with a trend towards short break holidays, and in recent times a more active state tourism authority has promoted the area.
The Tourism Victoria campaign has been huge. I think it's encouraged people to see what is in their backyard. And I think also the trend now is that people are taking short breaks rather than waiting until the end of the year for their 2 or 3 weeks annual holiday. They're taking short breaks every 6 weeks, getting away for a weekend, and obviously you need somewhere close for that.
For people living in Melbourne, Daylesford was considered close. The old guest houses have been reopened with a new lease of life, and many cottage homes have been renovated and decorated to provide bed and breakfast accommodation. In fact, there are now more than 3,000 B&B beds in the area. Another local tourism icon which has been a significant factor in recent tourism growth has been the conversion of an old convent into an art gallery complex in 1991 by artist and businesswoman Tina Benitska. The convent gallery won a number of important tourism awards and generated a great deal of publicity, bringing more and more visitors to the town who often stay in B&B accommodation. Tourist activity snowballed, and since the early 90s, the commercial centre of Daylesford has boomed with a wide range of cafes, restaurants and all kinds of specialty shops. In the same year that the convent gallery opened, the spa centre was refurbished, there's an impressive calendar of events, and a number of new tourist attractions have appeared on the scene. So these days, don't let your car roll unattended down the main street. Even on weekdays, just finding a place to park can be quite a challenge.
Over the past few years, I think that most of the inhabitants have come to accept the fact that they are involved or they live in a tourist town, and tourism is our mainstay now, yeah.
In the past, gold, timber and farming were the main industries that provided employment and wealth for Daylesford and Hepburn, with tourism being an added benefit earlier in the 20th century. Now it's the other way around. The major industry is tourism, and there appear to be a lot of dollars moving around.
There are a lot of benefits for the community. The retail and services expenditure is been estimated only several months ago by a retailing expert to add $6.5 million to the local community. And based on his assessment, that's about a 40% boost to the local economy. And that is very much proven by the fact that 7 or 8 years ago there are many vacant shops in the shopping centre here, whereas now it's almost impossible to find one. So there's that benefit. The locals and visitors benefit from the bigger range of services, restaurants, shops. We have more solicitors, banks than most country towns. The flow-on benefit also comes to the local tradespeople and builders. We have a very healthy building activity sector here, and the tradespeople keep very busy building new buildings or refurbishing cottages.
But those flow-on benefits aren't always obvious, which is the reason that the local tourism business people devised an ingenious PR campaign.
The number of local traders who say things like, well, it doesn't make any difference to me because I'm not in the tourism business is extraordinary. So actually the Chamber of Commerce developed a little stamp that says this is paid for with your tourism dollars, so that every time we pay the local hardware or the local plumber or the local electrician, the local greengrocer, the local floor polisher and all of the other local facilities that we use, they actually get a cheque that says this is paid for with tourism dollars. And of course they then use that money to go down and buy something else, and so the tourism dollar really does go right through the local economy.
Tourism dollars have also meant better facilities for the local community.
I think because there's such a collection of people up here operating and running businesses that don't just come here at the weekends, it's meant that important sort of infrastructure that's a key to a town like this. We have 3 primary schools, we have a secondary college, there are 2 medical practices, there are a wide range of coffee shops and cafes, we have a hospital, we have the police here. We've got all those things that make living in a small town attractive, with the support network, which is also important.
On the other hand, a criticism of the local tourism industry is that the money isn't staying in the town at all.
They keep talking about the tourist industry, it's an injection of funds, it's pumping so many dollars into the economy, and I think that is often largely very false. For instance, a lot of the cottages are owned by people in Melbourne. They're promoted and their bookings are taken in Melbourne. They fill their car up with petrol and food and goods and they come up for the weekend. And if, for instance, they do their figures, they would say, oh, you know, there was so much injected into the local community. But really, the little bit injected in the local community is only a very small portion of what that weekend cost. And the profits go back to Melbourne anyway.
But not so, according to Alla.
I find that an extraordinary argument, and what I've seen of local businesses is that they tend to, as they grow and develop, they actually tend to reinvest in the town. You know, there's been many cases of people that have started a B&B and have done well and then have gone ahead and bought another cottage or another B&B, or started or taken a part share in one of the cafes. Or there's plenty of that reinvestment in the local area. I mean, you know, this place has grown from just a restaurant to a restaurant with rooms, and now it's a hotel, and, you know, we're thinking of expanding as well. So, you know, I can't imagine that the money's going out. I mean, all of our suppliers come locally. The only thing that we don't get locally really is fish from the sea, which we get from the markets in Melbourne. But we use the local greengrocer, we have a local butcher supplying us, the local hardware store, both hardware stores. We have huge accounts with local hardware stores, the news agency, plumbers, electricians, tradespeople, gardeners, you name it. I mean, whatever our business needs, the local laundry, whatever our business needs, we use local suppliers.
When tourism businesses like Alla's do spend locally, this flow-on effect is often referred to as the multiplier effect. The dollars that are spent by customers at Lake House are new dollars to the local economy. When the Lake House spends this money locally, it flows on to, say, the employees of the greengrocer or other businesses. It means that every dollar that a tourist spends in Daylesford could mean that something like $4 or $5 extra result. But it's important to realise that this only happens when the money stays active in the local economy. If the shops are buying in supplies from outside the area, like Graham suggests, then the advantage is lost. It's called economic leakage. Overall, it's hard to argue with the idea that there have been economic benefits to the people who live and work in Daylesford and Hepburn as a result of tourism. As Victor mentioned, a recent report detailing the likely effect of a new supermarket estimated that $6.5 million would be injected into the local economy annually by people from outside the community. But the story becomes somewhat less clear when we look at the social impact of tourism on the community.
I think we've lost a lot of our local culture and local identity. We have lots of different groups coming here now. We're told that we have a drug problem. We're seen as the gay centre of Victoria, and a lot of these things are, you know, they're new to this town.
I think we're losing too many locals, too many that have been here most of their lives.
One outcome of the recent tourism boom has been the increase in value of real estate. For some locals, it's meant a pleasing windfall. That is, if they want to sell and move away. But for the less well-off, high prices are a problem, and even finding a place to rent can be quite difficult.
As a local welfare service, we're one of our biggest concerns is housing and the crisis in the housing situation at the moment, due to a lot of houses that were initially rented out on the long-term market, because there's been such a boom in the bed and breakfast industry now, and that's really shrinking the rental industry. And prices as well have gone up because of that, because there's a shortage now.
Another change that increased tourism has brought has been to the character of the town's neighbourhoods.
The popularity of the area has been not only for tourists to come and stay in bed and breakfast and cottages, but also for people who bought weekender accommodation. And at the last census, 30% of homes in the Daylesford, Hepburn Springs area were vacant. That's not because they're empty. It's very difficult to rent accommodation here on a long-term basis. It's because those 600 or so homes are used as weekenders, bed and breakfast and cottage accommodation. That in itself presents pluses and minuses. They pay rates, but those homes are empty. So it does affect the character of residential areas. So it shows just some of the impact of being a popular tourist area.
We're really surrounded here by houses that are empty for significant parts of the day or week, and that makes for a different kind of neighbourhood. I mean, it's quiet, which has got its advantages, but it also means that I think the sense of community is fairly fragmented.
For the new settlers who came to Daylesford for lifestyle reasons, there's a different but not unrelated impact. Sometimes they get the impression that what they thought was their community might be just part of a show organised as a spectacle to keep the visitors happy.
Every year there's a Swiss Italian Festa, and the community takes part. It's a parade. We all walk down to the bottom of the main street, and the feeling is really quite extraordinary. I think it's a feeling of the community coming together, and people make a special effort. The schools are involved, the kinders are involved, all the parents of the kids are involved, and we were thanked at the bottom by the Mayor for being a spectacle for the tourists. It made me feel really very miserable about being part of something that I had felt was for me and for my community, but in his eyes was something that we were just doing on behalf of the tourist industry to make the place more colourful, more vibrant, more interesting, and aren't we this weird and wonderful collection of characters that they can then take their photos of? So I was very insulted by that.
And for the local youth, the problem can be the opposite. Rather than being concerned because they're exploited as a spectacle, they're more likely to be moved on because they don't fit the image of the upmarket, trendy tourist destination.
They just feel pushed out even more from their community. They're feeling quite isolated and not really of much worth, and that really doesn't help the way they're feeling about themselves at the time. And yeah, they get pressured to move on because they don't look good if they're sitting in a group outside the post office. They're now currently going into behind the bank so that they're not getting moved on. But that's partly their responsibility too. They were causing a bit of strife. But I think, it's a real shame that we don't have anywhere for our local kids to go.
A big plus cited for having a booming tourism industry is employment. And as we've already seen, the increased commercial activity must result in job creation. It's surprising then that Daylesford has a significant unemployment rate. In the December quarter of 1998, Hepburn East, which includes Daylesford, was estimated by the federal government to have an unemployment rate of 19.1%, while the rest of the state, excluding Melbourne, was 8%.
One of the problems with the tourism industry in an area like this is they're mostly micro businesses. So a lot of the subsidiary employment is both casual employment and part-time, but there is a lot of that around. There are lots of jobs here, but not necessarily the full-time jobs or continuous jobs.
And whether they're employed or unemployed, few of the locals are keen on the tourist prices they're asked to pay when they go shopping in town.
The prices are a bit higher than what you would expect in a town like this, which I think is due to the fact that tourists are willing to pay higher prices. They come up for the weekend, what they want is what they get, and they're willing to pay anything, I suppose.
Daylesford doesn't have the problems of a resort development built in pristine wilderness, and tropical rainforest hasn't been cleared to make way for its cafe culture or B&Bs. But there are issues here related to the natural environment. As far as the local native forests are concerned, the impact of tourism could be quite positive.
The overwhelming effect on the environment here, and where the real tension is between the needs of the foresters and the local mills and the requirements of both people who live here and tourism operators to say, come up to the Wombat Forest. It's a nice drive from Balan. You come through the forest, look out for the kangaroos. If more of the forest is taken away, that will go.
At the moment, you've got the situation where the Wombat Forest Society is saying that there's not enough timber here to sort of last more than about another 40 or 50 years. So from my point of view, I see it as a much better sort of economy to be one based on tourism, which is cleaner and obviously renewable resource if you keep the forests going instead of cutting them down, than the forestry itself, which will run out.
But all the tourism could also be having a negative impact, especially on that other major attraction, the spa waters. It's possible that without care, the underground water could follow in the footsteps of the town water supply, which was until recently considered a health hazard.
Well, firstly, there's the issue of the amount of mineral water that they're using down there. No one's really looked at the question of whether what they're using is a sustainable amount. They have a licence for 10 megalitres a year, and there have been suggestions that they are using more than that, and no one's really fully investigated that question and looked at whether it's sustainable or not. So they might be just completely eroding the resource. We just don't know.
Another question is whether any future development of the spa complex would place additional stress on the resource.
The thing is, there's a real risk that a development down there, and particularly where they're proposing it, will contaminate the mineral springs, and the other risk is that it may actually stop the flow of the springs, and those two things have happened in the past. So the site that they want to develop on has a previous history of contaminating the springs, and other activities in the area have a previous history of contaminating the springs and causing cessation of flow.
Finally, it's worth looking at the body that has the power to control at least some of the impacts that tourism has on a community, the local council. In this case, the Shire of Hepburn. A few years ago, it seemed that tourism was something for council to ignore.
If there was ever any question in, getting an extra $5 from council to put up a banner in the main street for some festival or something, you really had a hard time, because there would be councillors debating the issue of $25 grant or something, in the council meetings saying, well, my business, which might be raising cows, doesn't get a subsidy from the council, why should tourism? And no one could really see potential in the town for tourism as employment. As future employment for people in the town. So it was very, very difficult. It was not until we established an actual subcommittee of council on tourism and we did that quite deliberately. There were 2 or 3 of us that got together. We did that quite deliberately because it meant we had to issue a report to council once a month, and then they had to actually mention tourism. Otherwise it was sort of anathema. They didn't want to talk about it. They used to have ratepayers meetings in which they clearly said they didn't want tourism. My argument with them always was that tourism was going to happen anyway. And I can give you the reasons why I thought it was going to happen. And if they didn't have some kind of controlling measures or some kind of committees to handle it, it would happen in a very willy-nilly fashion and basically, I think, destroy the local community.
Now the council does play an active part in the promotion of the Shire as a tourist destination, and at the time of filming was putting the finishing touches on its strategy for land use and development, with quite an amount of input from the community, tourist operators and other interest groups. But a basic problem faced by the Shire is that while the council and in turn the ratepayers bear significant costs in the name of tourism, there is the problem of finding the money to pay for it.
The council has not been able to tap a suitable way of getting money out of the tourism industry. There was a very bitter debate about 2 years ago over the question of the imposition of a levy on tourism operators. Led to a great deal of anger and tension in the town because a surprising number of people, especially in Daylesford, even though they run a coffee shop, don't believe that tourism necessarily benefits them very much. So council has a problem. It's not got a very big tin box to get money out of, and yet there needs to be money taken out of this tin box to promote the town.
So there you have it. There are certainly important lessons to be learnt from the Daylesford experience, especially for communities eager to promote themselves as tourist destinations or for people involved in the business of tourism. But perhaps one of the most important lessons to be learnt is that the relationship between the community and the tourism industry can be quite sensitive, and that it's in the best interests of people keen to encourage tourism to make sure that the community is made aware of the positive outcomes while working to overcome any real or perceived problems.